Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast, where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Taylor Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories, stories that amplify voices, challenge norms, and foster understanding. Today, I am honored to be joined by my friend, Shannon Ivey, my adopted auntie. So I'm excited to talk about her work doing storytelling activism and how she incorporates that with her coaching business. So, Shannon, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and share about your journey into storytelling activism and coaching and what inspired you to pursue these paths?
I was thinking this through this morning and I wrote a terrible poem. I'm not going to read it to you, but what I was reflecting on is as a firstborn child born to a football coach and a cheerleader who were evangelical Christians, I was raised to be silent and helpful. Somehow I, through school, found theater. Well, I found the arts. And through theater, I found a way to speak. So I followed that path professionally and through graduate school, and even taught theater as an professional actor and director for 20 years. But what I recognized around 2012, 2013, I recognized that I was teaching people how to speak other people's words. I had an MFA in being other people. And the canon of theater is written by who? So that would be white men. And I realized that I couldn't find myself in the literature. So I was like somehow teaching people how to exist within that narrative, other people's words, other like the story according to white men. So who did I play? Witches, stepmothers, weird aunts with something to say. Troublemakers is who I was cast as, right? And then I had this awakening at South Carolina State University. I had a student named Travis. I talk about Travis all the time. Travis came up to me and he's taken 5 of my classes. He's hilarious. He's going to be an elementary school teacher. He's lovely. He gives the best hugs. Love Travis. There was something up at South Carolina State University with my students and me. And I couldn't figure it out. I had taught forever. So I thought like, why isn't this stuff working? So Travis, after modern drama class one day, was like, can I talk to you for a minute? And I said, sure. And he said, I've taken all of your classes. I've taken 5 of your classes, and I still don't know what you like. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, I don't, I don't know where you are in all this. Do they tell you what to teach? They tell me what to teach. Like that's what elementary school teachers. We got to learn what to teach, and they tell you what curriculum, and like you can't really veer. Do they do that to you? And I said, well, and he said, okay, do you know any Black playwrights? Do you know any gay playwrights? Do you know any women playwrights? Do you know anybody else that's doing this work? And I realized what had happened. I'm like, and I just looked at him and he was like, I was just curious. So I went home and had a complete existential crisis after 20 years, right? It's like, oh no. And I'm teaching at an HBCU that was already having such struggles because of money and then like the state. And I was like trying to do the best by my students who were living in some horrific conditions on campus. So I was already like auntie activated on their behalf. And then I'm letting them down with my crappy training and my lack of understanding. So I went to figure it out. And I found myself at a training called Theater of the Oppressed, Joker training at TO, Theater of the Oppressed NYC. And I realized a lot of things. And that began my path into reclaiming like both a political understanding of the power of stories, who tells them, who is handed the mic. That was like 2012, 2013. And I brought back this curriculum, which is popular education on its feet, a theater curriculum that like flattens the hierarchy. We co-create. It obliterates the space between spectator and actor, and we call it a spectactor. It's a lovely methodology. It has some, of course, I could critique it too. I brought it back to my students. I was like, okay, I give you egregious extra credit, like ridiculous extra credit to try this with me. And they did, and people heard about it. And I got asked to do a TEDx talk in Columbia, South Carolina, to talk about the work. And then my brain was like, you want me to talk about the work that I'm doing at an HBCU? I'm like, that's not working out. Like, that's not right. Like, it's not my work. It is a tool I'm using, and my students and I are co-creating it. They're like, yeah, but you're the professor. I'm like, nope. So then like I did like this thing I do where I'm like, nope. I'm like, here's what we could do. They're like, no, we don't want students on stage. They said something like that. And I'm like, well, Theater of the Oppressed Forum Theater is interactive. So we have performers. I'm like, well, if you want me and if you want this work, then you're going to have to understand that this is how we do it. It's interactive. And they are on stage with me. How many? I don't know, 12, 13. They're like 12 or 13. Anyway, it was a bunch, it's a whole thing. So if you look up State of the Union, I've forgotten what we called it. But if you look up Shannon Ivey, TEDx, Columbia, Forum, Theater, FORUM, you'll see me and my students because we did it. And we're on stage. The sound is not great. It's still problematic that I'm on stage with them, but it gives you sort of this like peek into time of me beginning to deconstruct a lot of things. That's the beginning. And then I learned I needed to begin to tell my stories too. And I found an entry through Moth style story slams. And then I realized those were just essays on their feet. And then I created the What She Said Project Story Slams. And I did that for 10 years. And now I'm writing a memoir. Is that good? There you go. And done. Scene.
All of the things, all of the like, I love how it started like as a seed and how it like grew. And I just did like a reflection on and you and I talked about this, how like it's about the roots. It's not
Yes.
growth is not always about like what you see on the surface, but it's about the roots. And when you talked about like how you began to deconstruct and using theater as a form of storytelling to identify the power dynamic, not only who is writing the plays, but the power dynamic between like performers and who gets to perform and who gets to create the art. And I just like love all of those connections. And I'm wondering too, you talked a lot about your work with like Theater of the Oppressed and the beginnings of What She Said project. Um, how do you what else or like are your other thoughts in believing that storytelling can be a powerful tool for both activism and personal growth? You alluded to a little bit when you said you started telling your own stories, but um how can storytelling be kind of that tool for activism and personal growth?
I believe it all starts with the human. Because if we look at, I used to have this course I called Passenger to Protagonist. I know that metaphor is problematic, but when I think about a protagonist from the classical sense, like if I were to ask like a regular person what a protagonist is, they might say that looks like a hero. And then I'm like, well, what does a hero look like? And then they might say something that looks like a white prince from like Cinderella. Right. And so we think about that. And if you deconstruct it, that's really disempowering. And maybe 10, 20 years ago, it was even more so. We didn't have many protagonists that were young or indigenous or Black or brown or queer. And now we're beginning to see some variation, differentiation in protagonists, but it's still difficult to find. Even within each subgenre, you come to an end where you're like, where's more? I want more. And when you realize that, you may come to the conclusion that you are there to help that. So when I think of more, For me, coming out late in life, I think that's interesting. And I'm willing to write about that, whether it be like essays or whatever, just to expand not only the capacity to hold these stories, but to be found, to have people find themselves in me and then be like, oh, I'm not alone. This is not weird. It's interesting. So a part of that journey, okay, reel that back, because I could talk about that forever. A part of it is having the ability to shut off the narrative that you're not important, that your story isn't important, and that the strength building possibility of, oh wait, my story is valuable and your story is valuable and they're different, and to be able to hold the disparities, but also in there. I was thinking about this. Here's the hardest thing I'm going to say. It's not entertaining. I'm laughing because it's terrible what I'm about to say. That in these stories, there are complex narratives that are painful to hold on the margins. They're painful. And if you are willing, and this is my editor in my ear right now, I rewrote the first chapter of the book because my editor was like, Shannon, you're not telling us the terrible truth. I know you're not. She said it in a different way. But for folks on the margins willing to tell complex stories, I'm not saying like you have to tell the trauma, but if we're willing to add to the narratives, I think it gives us a broader understanding of what folks go through. So we can like release the embedded notion of meritocracy. Meritocracy drives me insane, and it's inside my body. I get it. That's why people keep their secrets, because we're taught that bad things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to people who make bad choices. And that's not completely the truth. So in coaching, often I work with folks who have an embedded story, and I can hear stories. I can hear the through line of that story because I've also done political education work and a truckload of therapy. I'm not a therapist, but I can hear it. Do you know? When they're blaming themselves or they are giving their power away, like a disempowered protagonist feels like they can't make any choices that would make anything better, anything. So it's like learned helplessness. I can hear it. Did that answer your question? That was a long answer.
Yeah, no, and it brought up so much for me as I was listening to you, because especially when you said like um that representation is so important, and that's definitely why I started Liberation is Lit, is to center those stories that have been pushed to the margins, where like we don't even think that these protagonists exist, and it's like there's a whole world of these stories that we just don't hear about. I wonder why. Um, but something else that really struck me too is how you talked about how like meritocracy like lives in your body, and how the trauma people who have been historically pushed to the margins have living in their body, and how one way to get it out is like through storytelling. So I'm curious to hear more about your perspective of like the intersectionality between storytelling, activism, and just general well-being. I would love for you to expand on that a little bit more.
I have a theory. When I would be working with folks with the What She Said project, and I would be doing these workshops, which I'm not currently doing. I'm thinking that through. So just so folks know, I go through phases of, and I have understandings, and then I like pause certain pieces of work. And I think because of the memoir, I'm also like, and my editor was like, why are you making this better for us when this story is hard? And I'm like, oh, so I don't want to be policing anyone's story or having them to feel like they have to put a bow on the end of it. I just want to be intentional about that work. So when people would come into a story workshop, and because I've done this work forever, it can get sneaky deep quickly. I know how to establish safety. I know how to do that circle facilitation. But sometimes when you go really deep, what bubbles out is something maybe you had time to work on it, might not have shared. And without trust in the room and in one workshop, once something bubbles out, it's out. And because so many of us live with meritocracy, it's like then we like in our heads, we're humans are so terrible. I love them. And also we're terrible. We like label someone as something. You're like, Janet, the bad divorce. They're like, which Janet? You're like, husband was gay, bad divorce. Or like, I'm just making this up. And so then we label them as the worst thing that happened to them. And then you live with all these people you see them later and they're like, oh. So I've been thinking a lot about self-consent. And now I have trained myself. Like there are things I will share in a group that will bring me to tears. I was in a restorative justice workshop this past weekend, and I told my friend who was with me, Debbie, I said, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to share something light. I'm going to keep it light. Well, there was a workshop, and in the workshop, there was a thing of like, what kind of circle would you lead? And so I write about being the parent of a trans kid. And that would be a circle I think I would want to lead. And I see that, sure enough, the minute I start talking about it, I'm crying. Now, I know myself and I gave myself consent. It's like, am I okay? And I am now with you. I'm okay with this being knowledge. I'm okay with having a big squishy heart about my kid. I'm okay. There's no part of that. If people are like, do you know Shannon? Which Shannon? She's got a trans son. I'm okay with people saying that. But in some circles, things bubble out and there's not enough skilled care to like really have that container be safe, really. Like, and I don't believe in safe spaces. I believe in brave spaces. And the fallback of that, there are words about that. Vulnerability hangovers can last years, if not decades. I got that phrase from Brene Brown. Who got it from? I don't know who. So I think about this work and I really feel like humans deserve the dignity to have the space to craft the story they want to tell. My editor and my OG bestie, who was my first reader and my first editor, said, you don't have to tell everything. And I said, I know. And they're like, but there's a space between what you are telling now and what needs to be told that you are about to wrestle with. And that is what I just deeply believe in: dignity and consent and care, and also the truth. So that's a complicated answer. I got very serious. But did that answer your question?
Yes, and I immediately thought of Jada Pinkett Smith's book Worthy, and how like I don't know, all of the things that you said about just you don't have to tell everything, but also people being labeled as like the worst thing. And I feel like because she wrote her story, she's been labeled as this I don't know, like this person who tells it all and like as a bad thing.
Yeah.
They definitely weaponized her vulnerability against her.
Mhm.
And not only is she like the worst thing that happened to her, it's like all of the terrible things and it's like every time you think of her, it's like all of the things that she was vulnerable enough to share.
Mhm.
And like I feel like that process, like she didn't get the dignity that she deserved. And everybody like talked trash about the book. And like I feel like the book wasn't the problem. It was written in her voice. It was her truth. I think it plays into like larger issues around Black women and vulnerability and not being protected. But that's a whole other tangent I could go on. But that just what like your answer definitely reminded me of just like she's doing as a person, like her well-being after telling her story and how people mishandled it.
And
Um,
this Jada, right? This isn't like
right.
we see how people handle Britney.
Yes.
You see? You see?
Yes.
People show up for the, I'm not going to say the next thing I almost said. We as humans, I almost said something that labeled her as something. I'm like, I think it's complex. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult. My heart is like, what am I watching? Am I complicit in this? I have feelings about this. Also, I might shave my head. I don't know. But we as humans will watch and say things. And so I think about this memoir. I think about any time I'm recorded or I put an essay out, I think about my kid. And I'm like, okay, hit by a bus, eaten by a shark, my words are going to exist. Will these words do harm? I mean, he's a teenager. He's embarrassed by my very existence. That is normal, and I'm okay with it. But I just think about as I'm telling certain stories, they're those connected to him. And as his mother, I'm connected to him. I just sort of think about, will this harm my mother? Do you know, it might be a little bit Buddhist, but I'm not trying to cause harm. I'm not trying to cause harm. So I do put that through that vein. We'll see if it turns out to be a bad book. But I do think about that, you know, I think about it. Not all of us get a day in court. And sometimes writing is how we do it. But then it's like, I want to write a book that's helpful to someone else. And I think about the book we're working on. I mean, that is a testament to classy writing. Like we get that there is some deep mess happening, but I never once feel like I need to Google somebody's name that's done Rachel wrong. Do you know? Anyway, I'm like reading it, thinking about how Rachel E. Cargle is who we're talking about. Taylor and I are doing this book club right now. And I'm just thinking, like, you walk away from it with her centered, moving her life forward. Like, this is a testament protagonist writing. It doesn't feel like shade or tea. It feels like the truth. She puts it in a context of power and then moves her life forward. And we're like, wow. Anyway, that's how I'm interpreting it. She like puts it in contexts.
That's why I'm a huge fan of memoir. And I love so the book we're doing is A Renaissance of Our Own, a memoir manifesto on reimagining by Rachel E. Cargle. Phenomenal book. I read it twice. I recommend it to everybody. It's so
Oh,
great. But that just has me thinking too about like the care of storytelling and realizing that the boundaries of telling your own story and dipping into telling somebody else's story, it goes back to that dignity and care piece that you talked about. And I definitely think that is like super important to keep in mind when sharing your story. Um, but I know we talked a lot about uh working through like what comes up with us when trauma and all of the things we hold in our bodies
mhm.
like come through our storytelling. I wanted to ask you like what keeps you grounded in this work?
I I am a work in progress forever. So I think it's the actor training, but maybe I don't know which came first, chicken or egg. Trauma, actor training. Trauma, actor training. I think I have used it. I think I've used acting as other people as a dissociative release. Walking in their body. I'm a character actor. I've always been, even though occasionally I play ingenues. I know if people can see me, they'll be like, really? Yes. I lived in a hetero cis world for a long time and had the hair. Um, Now I know that I cannot survive without an embodied practice. So I have lots of them. I'm really grateful to all of the trauma therapy that I've done in the past and all of the breath work. I'm grateful. I went and got certified in yoga when I was in a really difficult marriage. You know, I'm like, I have all these tools, but in the end, I have built a life now where I'm in my body more than I'm out of it. I own my business. I work out. I have like a weightlifting practice. I treat my body in a way that is kind, feed it well. And like my body has the stories in it. And even I know when I'm in like, if I do some yoga, which is not always helpful for me, sometimes yoga can feel like I need to lift heavy things. But like if I'm in like pigeon on my left side, all of a sudden I'm terribly sad about Kevin, my 8th grade boyfriend. Hilariously, I'm almost 50. This 8th grade boyfriend pops up and I'm just like, oh, Kevin didn't love me when I loved him. And I'm like overcome with sad. That's in my left hip. It's always there. So now I can recognize it and like, I'm like, well, there you are. Yes, we have great squishy love for people who are not always reciprocal. And then I just let it pass because I know how to use the breath to let it pass. But before it would like get stuck in my throat. So I think now I think of myself as like an athlete of the. There was a book that we used in actor training way back when with that. And I'm like, I didn't get it, but now I get it. Also, coaching, therapy, physical practice, taking care of my body, all of this came from a moment that was kind of scary, it all changed. So I'm grateful to be here and be able to be in this body well.
I love that. Athlete of the heart. I'm gonna have to start meditating on that. I feel like so I just started a Substack, not to do a shameless plug. But just started a Substack and um the conversation we had about roots, that became my first Substack post. But now I'm gonna have to meditate and think on and write about being an athlete of the heart. Definitely gonna send you credit though.
Well, send you back credit. What you were talking about is like reading memoirs helps a person, this came from you, have the capacity to hold difficult stories in life. That's what
Mm-hmm.
you said.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like weightlifting for the heart. Reading and working with your own story, writing your story, working with it, working with a coach or a therapist, and seeing how it shows up in your daily life. That is like PT for your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with you.
Okay, I can't wait to go write about that later. Okay, so just a couple more questions to like wrap us up. But what I know you talked about the book you're writing, but what are some like upcoming projects you got working on that you're excited about?
So I have this memoir that it's being lightly held by University Press because it is a medical memoir. So I'm in draft 2. I've been writing it for that's probably 6 years. So it's one of those stories, but I've been lightly writing it. So I'm excited about that. I have some really exciting clients right now. I'm really enjoying performance coaching. So I'm trained as like a ICF, International Coaching Federation, ICF certified professional coach. I love to coach all the things, but I really love coaching folks with a story. I love coaching folks like I told you about my midlife people and my 30-year-old people are tracking the same. I think it's a pandemic thing. I think it's fat. My nerdy self is fascinated. Yes, y'all are experiencing early midlife. So I have like 30-year-old clients and I have like 50-ish-year-old clients that are like, I got it. My life needs meaning. Let's go. So I get excited about my clients. I'm reading voraciously now. Um, I have some stuff that is like, I got recruited the other day. So I don't know what that's about performance coaching somewhere else. And I applied to do a PhD program. So I don't know. Just meeting cool people, walking alongside them as they like reclaim their life, their voice, and their future. And I'm doing the same right beside them.
I love it. I love it. And to sing Shannon's praises, like our conversations have been so good for me and I just love having coaching friends because one, I get free coaching, but they're always like, okay, is it okay for me to put my coaching hat on? I'm like, absolutely, give me all of the coaching. So like our conversations, like I said, have just been phenomenal. And I'm one of those 30-year-olds. I'm currently going through my Saturn return right now. So I think that might be the parallel, because I think like mid to late 50s, depending where they were born, they might be going through their Saturn return as well, the second one. Because
Wow.
the first one is like late 20s, early 30s.
You know what? If we were in a weightlifting place, I would say, you know, the move snatch. It's like I should. You what? I know. Okay, so the snatch is like you've got a dumbbell, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're standing, and you like bend over, grab it, and you go. Whoosh. So that's a
Oh, that's what
you
they're
do that
called.
move. That's what I
I'm not
do.
that advanced.
I love us. This is like a life snatch. And then when
Yes.
I do it, as I get stronger, like now I can do 30 or 35, these muscles are really going to bust out of this shirt. I love feeling very strong. But
Yes.
I think that there's an exit sign across from me, and I like talk to it in my head. Look, no one's going to want to know me after I tell them this. I like look at the exit sign and I do these stronger and stronger snatches, and I'm like, watch this. So that Saturn return for me is like, watch this. It's so exciting to walk with people as they decide to do that in their life. And it has been a dream to watch you do it with Liberation is Lit. And you're just getting started. You're literally just getting started. Watch out.
I'm trying. I've heard if you go with the snatch, it's a lot easier than trying to fight it. So depending on who you talk to,
Don't
that
fight
doesn't
the
sound right.
snatch. That's our new t-shirt. Don't fight the snatch.
Don't fight the snatch.
Hilarious.
Okay. Um, Lastly, what advice would you offer listeners, viewers, who want to make a positive impact on their communities?
I'll try to make this brief, but I actually have an essay about sitting at the feet of an activist artist named Ebony Golden in the midst of like 2016, 2017. This wasn't even 2020. And sitting at her feet and like thinking like, what do I do? I don't know how to help. And Ebony looked at me and said, you turn around and you go do your yard work. I got my yard work. So what I would say to people is the work starts here with you. And so although I want to be helping in communities of people that are different than me, a part of what I need to do is like examine and work on my own stuff so that I can turn around to people who look just like me and be like, okay, we have work to do. And let me tell you how I've understood it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like understanding my inner biases and how it shows up and how I am understanding my foundations has really helped me show up in a powerful and generous and kind way. Yes, that's what I would say. Do your own yard work.
It reminds me of it's actually a gospel song, but it played on the gospel stations a lot when I was growing up. But I don't remember what the song is called, but it's like, sweep around your own front door before you try to sweep around mine.
That's true.
I was sweeping the other day.
Okay, I have one more thing. I also learned to, and this is a Bell Hooks, Gloria Steinem phrase I learned. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, also buy all the Bell Hooks books, just buy them. Buy them from you. They said, notice when there's mutual hospitality. Mutual hospitality is that all people, you feel welcome, they want you there. Like when you're working outside of your of people who are like you, whatever that means to you, just be really aware of where you are welcome and it's natural, and building those relationships out of trust is really important, that you're not trying to like swoop in. So not power over, power with. So that's a phrase that I keep in my heart. I'm like, is this mutual hospitality, or have I invited myself to this party? If I have invited myself, then maybe I just need to check my intentions, you know?
Or even, am I crashing this party and I'm unwanted here? Which I felt that.
And then go ahead and leave. Go ahead and leave.
Yep.
Yep.
Just like church for Ladyfinger exit. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Shannon. Where can people find you and your work on these internet streets?
I would say the easiest place to find me is on Instagram at yes, it's Shannon Ivey. That's Ivey. Shannon-ivy.com is another place. You can find me at Shannon M. Ivey on Facebook. Or if you want to listen to some coaching slash storytelling slash interesting conversations, they can find me on my podcast at hashtag what she said project podcast.
If you love
Yes.
podcasts, follow us and what she said at hashtag what she said project.
Hashtag what she
Yes.
said project. Yeah.
Hashtag what she said project.
And look for your episode.
Oh yeah, I'm on an episode too. Yes,
Right.
on 2 episodes. Yes, because we just had a lot to say, as you can see from this episode.
Always.
Well, thank you again, Shannon. I am so excited to just be in community with you. Thank you so much for being a part of the Liberation is Lit podcast. And listeners, if you have stories to share, want to suggest topics, or just want to connect, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, all of the things at Liberation is Lit. You can visit our website, liberationislit.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. Remember that your voice matters, and together, through the lens of stories, we're making a difference in the world. Thank y'all.